Monkey.
Now, I've been seeing a lot of news about apparently the PBC coming towards an end, that there is a lack of finances, and I even heard of apparently Deontay Wilder himself being unhappy with the PBC because of the lack of finances that they are offering him for the Andy Ruiz Jr. fight. In my opinion, the PBC, they've been the most frustrating network in possibly all of boxing, and I'll explain what I mean by that. The PBC have some of the best fighters in all of boxing. Guys like Deontay Wilder, guys like Errol Spence. They had guys like Danny Garcia, Sean Porter when he was an active fighter, and many more other tremendous fighters. That's just to name a few. But they were always unwilling to, with other networks, actually co-host fights with fighters from other networks and just, other promoters. And that meant that pretty much all of the PBC fighters, they were fighting in-house. That meant that we couldn't see fights like Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, not necessarily because Spence is ducking Crawford or because Crawford is ducking Spence, but more so because PBC, aren't keen on getting the fight done because Crawford was, at top rank, and I think now he's at Black Prime. But when Terence Crawford was at top rank, PBC were not interested in dealing with Bob Arum and Terence Crawford because they don't like co-promoting fights. Eddie Hearn even came out and said this before, that the PBC are the hardest network to deal with. Eddie Hearn even went as far as saying that the PBC is more difficult to deal with than Top Rank and Queensberry Promotions, which is Frank Warren and Bob Arum. And those guys don't like Eddie Hearn. But Eddie Hearn has come out and said that even they're easier to deal with than the PBC. So that says a lot about the PBC. The PBC, in my opinion, made it difficult for Deontay Wilder to ever get the Anthony Joshua fight. A lot of people say, AJ duck Wilder, Wilder duck Joshua. I actually think that the PBC were culprit in us never ever getting, Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua back in 2018. Deontay Wilder was offered huge amounts of money from DAZN. We all know that Al Heyman and the PBC, they made sure that Deontay Wilder, as Errol Spence would say, didn't cross that side of the street. At the end of the day, it's clear that the PBC just don't like their fighters fighting on other networks. They don't like, co-promoting, big events. They just want everything to be about in-house PBC fights and fighters fighting other PBC fighters. Really harm boxing. This has stopped us from seeing major boxing events such as Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, such as Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. At the end of the day, their model of making everything in-house has come back and bite them because, they're not doing well. They're struggling. And it looks like Deontay Wilder wants nothing to do with the PBC in this point in time. It looks like he wants to move on from the PBC. Deontay Wilder is one of the PBC's biggest cash cows. So with someone like a Deontay Wilder gone, we can see the Anthony Joshua fight. Maybe we can see a fight between, Deontay Wilder and Dillian Whyte. Maybe Wilder will be more likely to fight these guys because he's not being held down by the PBC. I often say that this fighter is ducking this fighter, but I've always been of the belief that fighters are not scared of each other. That most of the time, they want the smoke. They want to fight the other top contenders in their division. Mainly it's the promoters who are holding back the fights, and also work and all of these other companies trying to prevent the top fighters fighting each other, because if one of their guys loses, all of a sudden he doesn't have as much financial mileage because he doesn't have an O on his record. He's got at least one loss or multiple losses, and all of a sudden they feel like they can't push this guy out to the general public because, he's not undefeated. And just because a fighter has one loss on his resume, all of a sudden it seems like people are disinterested in him. And that's a big issue in boxing. Don't see this issue in the UFC. You've got top guys in the UFC who have lost. Look at that Islam Makhachev, the Russian guy. I think he's like pound for pound #1 in the UFC. You know, I'm pretty sure he's taken a loss. You know, guys like Kamaru Usman have taken a loss. Israel Adesanya has had 2 losses. Francis Ngannou, I think, has lost a couple of times, even though Ngannou just recently left the UFC. These guys were all top guys and are top guys in the UFC. They've all taken losses. Boxing, you just often see a lot of these undefeated fighters, but they fought, you know, Domino's delivery drivers, you know, Uber Eats drivers, and so on and so forth. Essentially, they just have padded resumes because they've fought a lot of guys way below their skill level. And, you know, the promotional companies can push, oh, well, this guy's undefeated. But what does that O really mean on his resume if he hasn't been involved in the best fights, in the most competitive fights? Because that's what we want to see. We want to see 2 elite guys go back and forth. Those make for the most spectacles, the biggest and most exciting fights in the whole of boxing. So, yeah, PBC doesn't look like it's going too well for the PBC. They look like struggling, and in losing Deontay Wilder, you lose one of your biggest assets. Whether you like Deontay Wilder or you dislike Deontay Wilder, you know, he's always in exciting fights, and people like knockouts. That's what people pay their, you know, well-earned money for, to see spectacular knockouts, and Deontay Wilder is almost guaranteed to give you a knockout or at least drop his opponent. So, yeah, this is a big L for the PBC. Just see, you know, what happens next for the PBC. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All right, guys, peace.